We had prayed, sought godly counsel, and we were convinced that we were following God's will. So where was God when I was almost killed in a car accident? Stay with me in this episode of Rightly Dividing with Ron Anderson, where I address the subject of where was God when? Scripture is not discerned by opinion. You cannot rightly apply the Bible until you first rightly divide the Bible. We do not get to decide what the Bible means. We get to discover what the Bible means. Welcome to Rightly Dividing with Ron Anderson. Thank you for joining me on this episode. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of the most frequently asked questions that we have in life, and that is, where was God when? Where was God when the bottom fell out, when the top fell in? Where was God when this tragedy happened in my life? Where was God when this great sickness came into my life or my family? I want to share with you in this episode one of the most traumatic where was God when moments in my life. And that happened in 1982. Now, this is part one of a two-part series. Part one, I'm going to set up the story, the testimony, and in part two, I'm going to answer the question, at least in my life and in my experience, of where was God when this happened. In 1982, I was living in central Pennsylvania, actually where I'm living now, but the economy was so bad it was difficult to keep a job. It was hard to get a job that had any longevity to it. I could get a job for a couple of months and get laid off again, get another job. And so we were praying, God, where do you want us to go? What do you want us to do with our lives? And so my wife and I, along with our two children at the time, our two oldest children, my son and my daughter. My son was just a couple of years old, and my daughter was an infant at the time. And we were seeking God's direction for our lives, not only for where we would live, but what we would do with our lives. We had already begun to sense a stirring in our lives to walk closer with God, to be obedient in every area of our lives. And so we were asking him, where do you want us to live? What kind of job, employment, career do you want me to have? I want what you want. That's what I want to do. And so we were praying fervently, frequently, asking God's direction. We were seeking godly advice from godly people that were around us. We were just really passionate about wanting to be in the center of God's will. And so I took one day and I drove from central Pennsylvania down to the Lancaster County area, and I put in one job application. And on the way home, I remember specifically praying, God, this may not be the exact location or even the exact job that you want me in right now. But if you want us to move, then use this to move us out from where we are now to this place so that maybe we can be one step closer to walking closer to you. And so till I got home after about the 3.5 hour drive, I had a phone call. I had a message waiting for me. And the message was from the plant manager of the place that I had put the application in, offering me a job before I ever got home. While I was praying in the car that God would use this, either close the door or open the door, it seemed like God not only opened the door, but he took the door off the hinges and set it aside. And so we took that as a confirmation that God wanted us to move there. So we made plans to move. We found a place to live in, a place to rent, and the day of the move, early in the morning, had family members start very early and take a U-Haul truck down with most of our large belongings. And then my wife and I, with our two children, loaded up our new-to-us Pinto station wagon that we had not yet even made a payment on. And my one brother-in-law and his wife were following along behind us. Now, we were traveling from down towards Bedford to get on the turnpike to travel down to Lancaster County. Right before we got into Bedford, we were coming across the ridge on the two-lane road down into Bedford, and it was right on top of the ridge where it kind of slopes off on both sides. And when on a clear day, it's a beautiful view, but this was not a clear day. It was foggy, and I mean serious fog. We weren't traveling very fast because of the fog, and it was one of those times where you're kind of looking right in the front of the car for the yellow line and the white line and trying to stay between them. And out of the fog, coming the opposite direction, on my side of the road comes this car traveling way too fast. And I swerved as far as I could without going off the side of the ridge, and the driver's side headlight of our car hit the driver's side headlight of the other car. So it was almost it would have been head on had I not moved over. And tore off almost the entire side of our station wagon. Spun the car around multiple times. I don't remember how many times the car spun around till it finally came to a stop, but it was multiple times. I remember for a split second hearing the engine racing, and I thought, my only thought was that the gas tank was full, and that was the side that the gas tank filler was on. And I remember turning the ignition off, and that was it. I don't remember anything else. I don't remember how I was removed from the car. I don't remember being on a stretcher. I do remember a few seconds of being in the back of the ambulance. I don't remember the ambulance ride to the Bedford Hospital. I don't remember any of that. My wife, my son, and my daughter had very minor injuries. I think my wife had a broken finger. My daughter, who was in the passenger side rear in a car seat, had glass fragments and scratches from flying glass. My son had some scratches and glass fragments, and he had a mild concussion from an object that came from the back of the station wagon and hit the top of his head. I, however, had traumatic head injuries to the left side of my face. On the impact, my head went forward and came into contact with the side window, the driver's side window, and shattered it. So you can imagine how hard my face hit that window. The car coming the other way clipped off the mirror, and it came in after my head had smashed out the window. It came in and smashed into my face, after I hit it on the window. So then that hit me, and all of that glass. My glasses were shattered, and glass fragments were shoved into my face, into my eye, into my eyelid. The roof of my mouth was broken. I do remember coming to a little bit in the hospital, in the ER, and sensing this weird sensation in my mouth, and I could feel that the top row of teeth on my left side were halfway across my mouth. The roof of my mouth was broken. Everything was pushed over to the center. The cheekbone was broken in several places. The orbital bone was broken in several places. My jawbone was broken. I had severe lacerations on my face, particularly to my eye. There were glass fragments in my eye socket and in my eye. I remember laying in the hospital ER and having this bloodied, wadded up mass of cloth pressed against my face. And the nurses kept telling me, because I kept wanting to move it, keep pressure on that, keep pressure on it. And the ER doctor came in, and he lifted that off of my face and immediately put it back on. And I remember him saying, "I'm not touching this guy. Call Dr. So-and-so." Now, when you're the one laying there, disoriented, in pain, not sure what's going on, I still, at that point, didn't know the condition of my wife and my kids. I didn't know whether they had been injured or not at that point. But when the ER doctor says, "I'm not touching that guy," that's one of those moments where you're saying, where was God when this happened? Because we had believed, and I believe now, that God was at work. God was leading us there. But it was one of those moments where you're saying, "God, where are you? I'm trying to follow you. I'm trying to be obedient. We prayed. You answered prayer. You opened doors. And then this happened." Where was God when that happened? Well, I'm going to answer that in part 2. This is part 1 of Where Was God When? You're going to have to join me for part 2 for the answer, because there are answers. There are specific answers that God was there. And I want to share those with you in part 2. So join me again on Rightly Dividing with Ron Anderson. You can send your questions and comments in to rightlydividingtheword215@gmail.com. Put comments and questions down below this video as well. Thank you for joining me, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate that very much. Take care. God bless. Now see you in part 2 of Where Was God When?